Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
Hi everyone, Sue here from 1A Auto, and today we have a 2010 Murano in our shop, and we're going to be doing the right inner axle seal. If you need any parts for your car, click on the link below and head on over to 1aauto.com. I want to give you a general idea of what we're doing, and you can get a visual of the actual inner axle seal right here and where it's dripping. There's quite a bit of fluid coming out of that seal, so we're going to take care of it. We're going to remove the axle and replace that inner seal. And then first we're going to do is drain that fluid out of that diff. I have the vehicle somewhat supported, 21mm socket, and I'm going to take the lug nuts off with some weight on the tires. I'm just going to break them free. Here we show you the driver's side, but the same process applies to the passenger side wheel. This has a lock, wheel lock, so I've got the wheel lock key lined up. Now I'm going to raise my vehicle on 2-post lift. You can use a jack and jack stands at home. We'll take the tire off. Now the vehicle's in the air, and I could just take the lug nuts off by hand. Take the tire off. The drain plug is an Allen, inverted Allen socket, so I'm going to use an Allen socket, and it's a size 10. Make sure you have a catch basin ready. I'm going to lift my bucket up to stop the splatter as much as possible. So this is the drain plug that just came out of that front transfer case differential. And it's a little magnet right here, so I'm looking for any metal. The manufacturer does put a silicone on there to stop leakage, and that's what you see right there. That's all gray rubber silicone. And other than that, that's pretty clean. So that's a good sign. We're all set to continue and just do the seal. I'm going to be removing this axle CV shaft, so for a better visual and access, I'm going to take this inner panel off. I'm going to use the trim tool from 1A Auto. You can get this on the web page. There you go. Got to remove the cotter pin on the end of the CV shaft axle. We're not going to reuse this. All cotter pins are non-reusable. You want to always replace them with a new one. They're literally pennies on the dollar. So we have to remove the axle nut. And if you don't have air tools at home, if you're already this low to the ground, put a pry bar in between the actual lug nuts and stop the wheel from turning. Don't rely on the park position in the transmission. It's way too fine of a delicate machine internally. You don't want to strain that and pop anything. 32mm socket on this axle nut. And you'll see it as this turns. Now we're going to remove the axle nut. I'm going to remove the lower part of the strut to the knuckle. The two mounting bolts are right here. They're both 21mm nut and a 21mm head for the socket. Let's lower the bottom. I'm going to reverse it on this side, use the socket on this side. Now I'm going to push on the actual rotor and housing, and you can push the bolts right out. They're both the same length, top and bottom, so you don't need to separate them. I'm going to disconnect the ABS sensor wire from the actual strut tower because I don't want any strain on that, just in case it pulls. Now we can actually take the spindle nut, take a small hammer and tap it through. You can see the little divot point right here in the center. It's there for a reason. If you just take a hammer and start hammering on this, you can round the end of the threads off. And we're not replacing the axle, so I have to reuse this. So I'll just use a punch and a hammer, tap it right through. I can see that the flex hose is going to have some strain on it, so I'm going to take the lock clip right out, and I'm just going to use a pair of cutters and just grab it and pull it out. Then I can pull it through that bracket. Now there's no strain on that flex, and you can see the CV shaft comes right out of the actual knuckle and hub, and we're all set there. I'm going to break free the way the inner axle seal mounts to the actual carrier bearing split is 2 bolts that go through. It's a 16mm socket. All right, so I have this set up where I have this hook that goes in between CV shafts, and then it's got the rod that's threaded in, and then I have a slide hammer that's threaded into that. We're going to see if we can tap this axle out from that carrier bearing. I'm going to grab the CV shaft and slide her out. Okay, so I see here the strut is in the way of pulling this completely out. Well, let's see if we can take a pry bar and just utilize this right here. Push it aside. Nice. And there is the passenger side axle. So now I'm going to take that axle seal out. I'm going to use a pry bar. I can just pop it right out. There it is. Now with the seal out, I'm going to take a clean rag and I'm just going to clean the surface area where I'm going to remount the new seal. You can also do this is where you're going to check and look for any damage, whether there's any burr marks or cracked casing. More than likely, it's usually just the rubber seal lets go on these kind of things, but it's good to give it a good visual. You cannot spray any cleaner in there, for that goes right into the transfer case. The diff looks okay to me. Now I've got my new seal and I clean the surface. So I'm going to bring my hand up from underneath and guide that seal right in. Hopefully I can get it to somewhat bottom out so I can get a punch in there, a brass punch, and try to tap it all the way around lightly. Trying to stay on the edge of the seal. I think the key here is to try to line it up at 12 o'clock tight, and I can hit right down here at 6 with the brass punch. Oh boy, it's all the way in on the top. Hopefully it won't pop out when I hit the bottom. Yeah, I think that's it. Just making sure that the seal is seated all the way around. There we go. It was sticking out just a hair on the bottom. Yep, now you can run your finger around that and you'll feel it should feel evenly all the way around. Now we have the axle that the seal rides right here. This is where the seal rides. So you want to give this a good exam and look at this bearing brace and see, make sure there's no grooves and there's no burrs. So we'll clean it up. I'm going to take the oils off the back of it. That way we know the new seal is not leaking. Okay. Now we'll really give that a good look. That little one bright clear line, you just take your fingernail and you ride across it. There is no ridge there, so I think we're going to be in fine shape. Let's install it. All right, so take a good look at this axle for the mounting holes on this are off balance, or off center, shall I say. They're off center. So now I'm going to look at that bracket and see that the off center piece is going to be facing up, because once it's in there, you're not going to be able to turn it. So I think it's going to be at this angle. Then I'm going to install that. That looks about right. And it's some cumbersome because it's so long here, but you've got to take real care of that seal. Do not rest the axle on it and install it at the same time. Be careful not to push on the seal. Okay, I think that's the way those are going to go. Yep. Maybe you can fit your hand up through the center here. Make sure it doesn't ride on that seal. Give it a good push in. Let's see if we can get this flange to line up. So then I took my steel punch and I just put it in the bolt hole and lined up, because it does spin. It's on a bearing, so that flange will spin back and forth. You can use a screwdriver. As long as you get it lined up, I'm going to start the 2 mounting bolts, so that way I keep pressure on both sides. This is, once again, not easy to get your hand in there. You might have to use a socket with an extension. Just make sure that when you start it by hand to feel it, feel those threads. There we go. So I shook the axle a little bit, and that straightened it out enough so that I could get the bolt to turn by my hand. That's that 16mm socket. Now I'm just going to take the 16mm socket extension, and I'm going to go back and forth and see if I can slowly pull that shaft right into that bearing housing and an equal. You feel it start to drag, go to the other side. You're also going back and forth, because if you did one side as tight as you could, you'd actually jam that flange at an angle. So think we might be there. Double check this side. Yep. The torque is 35 foot-pounds. 16 millimeter socket, 35 foot-pounds. I'm going to tighten that housing bolt down. And I got one over here. Perfect. I use the brake caliper hook to hold the knuckle up. Now we're going to take the CV shaft, put it right through that wheel bearing spline. Yep, centered out. And all you got to do is take the knuckle into the bottom of the strut, push down. Okay, let's see. There we go. Top one. Put the two nuts on. I'm going to put the ABS sensor wires back in the bracket. I can put my flex hose back in. If you've never seen a flex hose before, how it notches, see that notch right there? You've got a cutout right there in the strut bracket. So that goes in, and it flattens, bottoms right out, like that. Then you take the flat horseshoe spring clamp. You want the tension to go against it. Goes right into that little lip right there. It has cut out. Take a nice little hammer and tap it in. That's as easy as it is. 21 millimeter wrench and 21 millimeter socket. I'm just going to bottom these both out. Okay, we're going to torque that. Manufacturer's specs is 101 foot-pounds. I got my torque wrench already. Now we can put our axle nut on. That's a 32 millimeter socket. Just bottom it out because that has to get torqued to the specs. The spindle nut, the torque for the spindle nut is 177 foot-pounds. I've got my pry bar in between the lug nuts, putting pressure so I don't turn the drive shaft into the transmission. So I put the car in neutral to make sure that the axle spins freely so that I can really bottom out on the pry bar. 177 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to replace the cotter pin. Now just so we're going to raise it up and put the drain plug in, and I'm going to show you the fill plug. Quick note on these Nissan Muranos and also the Rogues. They have conditions on the gear, on that pumpkin gear inside that differential. I've already given it a visual, but I will explain to you better when I raise it up and show you the fill plug, that you need to take a mirror prior to doing any work if you have any sort of leak or a jumping condition in your drivetrain. You're going to take a mirror and look through the fill plug and spin the tire, have it neutral. You're going to look at the pinion gears and see if there's a tooth missing or a cracked tooth. Now I'm going to put the fender well splash shield back in. I have some universal body clips and pins I'm going to use. Now we can put the tire on. I'm just going to hand tighten them, and the next time I lower it down on the ground, I'll torque them to the manufacturer's spec. Now I'm going to reinstall the drain plug. That was a 10 millimeter Allen head. This is an aluminum casing, so I would just snug it right up until it stops, but don't force it. Just like that. That's good. Now I'm going to clean that area. Actually, I'm not going to clean it because I'm going to add fluid first, and if I spill, I'll be doing it twice. The fill plug is right there. 1/2-inch drive ratchet, right there. So I'm using a small extension, and then my short 1/2-inch drive ratchet. I'll break that free. More of that silicone from the factory, but that's what it is. So 1/2-inch drive fits right in there. So the fill plug is on the top, which I've already shown you, but there's a check valve right here. And it's a 12mm socket. I have a 1/4-inch drive I'm going to use, and I'm going to take that check plug out. The exhaust is right here too, so it's kind of tight. You might be able to get a ratchet wrench in there once you break it free. So it says it takes 0.3 liters of 80/90 gear fluid. So I'm going to fill it up until it drips out of this. So I'm going to put my catch pan right below that. So I'm going to use this fluid plunger, and actually we sell this on the 1A Auto site. It's a nifty little tool, and it comes with measuring side on the side, cc's or quarts, and I've got my 80/90 fluid here. I'm just going to fill it up. Okay, let's see if I can get this right up in there. Might have to put my hand up in here. Yep, now I'm in the hole for the fill. Squeeze the plunger. It's coming out. Perfect. Now I'm ready to put the check plug back in, the side one here. So now I'm going to take a 12mm ratchet. I'm going to tighten that up. Let's get my 1/4-inch socket in there and snug it right down. I just want to make sure that's tight. I don't want any leaks. Let's put the fill plug in. Put my 1/2-inch extension on there. See if I can get it down a little tighter. And I'll get my ratchet and bottom it out. There we go. Just want to make sure that's really tight. You don't want water. There we go. Beautiful. Let's clean her up. It's pretty messy. It's been leaking for a while. Make sure you get all the gear fluid off the subframe. All right. So now I'm going to torque the wheel. I've got my wheel lock key already on, and the wheel torque for this manufacturer is 80 foot-pounds, 21mm socket. So I'm going to start over here. Always do it in a star pattern. That way you seat it against the hub in an equal force. Now do it one more time.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.